Hello, everyone. I am Melissa Rubino. I am the product manager at T-Scan, and I will be joined, as you can see in the video, by my colleague Jen Cullen, business development and sales manager at T-Scan. Would like to start by thanking you for joining us today. Today's webinar is an introduction to our newest product, T-Scan Novus Core. We encourage you to ask questions through the questions feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll attempt to answer these questions at the end of the session, and if we don't get the opportunity to answer your question, we will contact you after and provide you an answer. Most of you are likely familiar with Zoom, but in the event you experience any audio issues, you can dial in directly instead of using computer audio, which often solves the problem. At this point, Jen and I are going to turn off our videos for a bit in order for everyone to see the full screen of the presentation. All right, so in today's webinar, we're going to cover three different parts. First, we are going to cover the three most common problems dentists face every day when it comes to occlusion. Next, we are going to cover a brief history of digital occlusal analysis, technology, and T-Scan. And last but not least, an introduction to T-Scan Novus Core, including a live product demonstration followed by some case studies. At this point, we would like to ask a quick question via the poll about how familiar you are with T-Scan. So are you a current user, someone you know uses T-Scan, or you have limited knowledge of T-Scan? Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We have a nice mix of participants today, which is great. So some who are familiar end users and some who are new to the technology. So hopefully we will cover a lot today that will interest you and make you want to use T-Scan. So first, let's talk about problems. We've spent countless hours speaking with dentists in their offices, talking to you at numerous continuing education courses and venues, speaking to prominent experts in the field of dentistry, and learning from our network of key opinion leaders around the world. This led us to the identification of three of the most common occlusion problems dentists experience. For hundreds of years, dentists have relied on using articulating paper to identify occlusal contacts. And articulating paper does exactly that. It shows us occlusal contacts. However, what it does not show is the meaning behind those contacts. What is the force on that tooth? When did the tooth come into contact during the patient's occlusion? Articulating paper alone does not give you the full story. And we know from research that 94% of dentists struggle to pinpoint occlusion when it comes to using articulating paper alone. Problem number two, how often have you heard a patient say these words? Something just doesn't feel right. It's still high. I have sensitivity on this tooth. So for you as the dentist, how hard or easy is it for you to resolve that issue? As you're trying to help the patient, what is the impact for you? Is it causing extra time in the chair, returning visits by the patient, unscheduled visits and appointments, disruptions to your schedule? Ultimately, these situations are extremely frustrating, especially if you're unable to resolve the problem. The third problem that's been identified by our doctors is when they are finishing a case, whether it be a crown, a bridge, or a larger case, when they're ensuring that the bite is balanced and asking the patients, how does it feel? The patient sends you as the dentist on a journey of chasing the bite. Of course, you want to make sure that the patient is comfortable, but ultimately you need to make sure that the bite is balanced and that the right adjustments are done. Chasing the bite without digital occlusion data is time-consuming for you as the dentist, frustrating for the patient, and non-productive for your practice. Often, using a tool to help you measure the bite makes you do less corrections and less adjustments. Finishing your cases to a higher level actually helps prevent problem number two, where patients are returning with problems. And we have another poll that we would like to ask of, now that we've reviewed these three problems of case finishing, patients with repeat visits and using articulating paper alone, have you experienced any of these problems in your practice? Thank you, everyone. As you can see, there was a resounding yes. We had one no, but sounds like many of you have these problems in your practice, which is very common. So thank you for sharing. Which brings us to T-Scan digital occlusal analysis technology. T-Scan is a tool that has been proven to address these main problems and more. T-Scan gives you measurable data that identifies the location, the timing, and the force of your patient's bite, data that does not exist anywhere else. And so some of you who haven't been as familiar with T-Scan may be asking, what is T-Scan? T-Scan is comprised of three elements: the sensor, the handpiece, and the software. The sensors are designed to be used up to 25 times on a single patient. The handpiece is ergonomically designed, and most of the functions can be initiated directly from the handpiece to operate the software. And the software is easy to use, intuitive, and provides you with actionable data to help guide treatment. Which brings us to a little history lesson. So we want to spend a few minutes talking about history. To gain an understanding of how we got where we are and to share the vision of where we are going, it is important to examine how we got here, what circumstances and ideas, influences, innovations put us on this path, a path and a future where every dentist uses T-Scan to measure occlusion. When T-Scan was first developed, it was developed by a prosthodontist at Tufts University, Dr. Bill Manus, and engineers at MIT, one of which is our Chief Technology Officer today, Rob Podoloff. TechScan, which is the company name, not to be confused with T-Scan, then spent the better part of the next 10 to 15 years expanding into the automotive, medical device, and industrial market space. You may have even seen one of our more popular products to come out of this era, the Dr. Scholl's foot kiosks. Then, starting in 2015, with the emergence of digital dentistry, the company refocused their energy back into the dental industry and made several enhancements to the T-Scan, culminating with the introduction of T-Scan Novus with V10 software. And now here we are in 2021 with the introduction of T-Scan Novus Core. And so to clarify, TechScan's dental division has two product offerings for dentists in their clinics. The first, which we're introducing today, is T-Scan Novus Core, and that is most suited for the general dentist who is starting to incorporate digital technologies into his or her practice. It provides basic functionality needed to identify and analyze occlusal issues at a cost-effective price. For those practices who are already doing comprehensive dentistry, you're restoring implants and require more advanced analysis features, our T-Scan Novus product is the best choice for you. And so how did we get to T-Scan Novus Core? Extensive and comprehensive feedback told us that the market was looking for an entry-level, simpler, more streamlined and economical version of T-Scan, which is why we are introducing T-Scan Novus Core today. As you can see from the list of core applications, Core can be used to solve those common problems we discussed earlier on. Novus Core is best suited for single dental practices. One of the main reasons for this is that Novus Core cannot be networked within a practice, whereas T-Scan Novus is network compatible. With that said, there is a completely seamless method to upgrade from Core to Novus in the event you purchase Core and your needs change later. And now we are going to take a look at T-Scan Novus Core in action. So my colleague Jen Cullen will pick up from here and show you the T-Scan Novus Core with followed by some clinical cases. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take it away, Jen.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Alyssa. So I turned on my video. You should be able to see me. I'm going to go into the core software, so I will share that software, and we'll take a look, and you guys can see what it looks like, and then we'll do some case review as well. Let me share my software. Perfect. Alyssa, can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So let me just go through. Alyssa had mentioned the handle. So this is the T-Scan Novus handle. It's plugged into a USB port. So the handle is the same for Novus Core and for Novus. The sensors and supports are the same as well. That's why it's a seamless upgrade. It's just a software update from Novus Core to Novus. So we have the sensor, the large and small sensors. One of the questions that came up, which I thought was a good question, so I'll just answer it to everybody, was can you use the sensor on the same patient if they come in for a different appointment? And yes, you can. So 20 to 25 bytes on each one. If you want to wipe it down, you can use it for the next time the patient comes in, but not on different patients. Then there's the sensor support piece. These get, there's small and large of these as well, and those just get autoclaved. I'm going to put this in here. You guys will get to see my bite because I'm going to take a scan on myself. So I'm going to enter myself in as a patient. So if you're familiar with T-Scan already, you'll notice that the software looks similar. I'm not going to put in my date of birth so you guys don't know how old I am. Okay. So now I'm going to do new scan. Sorry, my screen is a little off. Okay, all right. So what you can see is when I press down on the sensor, and this is true for all of the product offerings that we have at T-Scan. So when I press down, meaning press both upper and lower, as if the patient was biting down, you start to see a force profile that shows up on the actual T-Scan. So as I press harder, you'll start to see those colors change. So blue is low force. As I press really, really hard, I can maybe generate a little bit more color in there. So let me take a quick scan so that you can see how this looks. Okay, so I did a couple bites there. And what you're going to see is after you take a scan on your patients, you'll be able to go in and play the scan back from the very beginning. So you can see the right-hand side of the arch is on the right here and the left is here on the left, but you can flip that if that's easier for you as a clinician. Let's see. Let me go ahead and play. So as I play through this scan, you'll see that my bite is off balance as far as I've got really heavy contacts back on number 2 and number 15. So you can see there's almost 25% of force on those contacts that are there. One of the things that we look for is this center of force trajectory. So we're looking at individual percentages on each tooth. We're looking at the overall balance right to left and where this balance is here on your patients. So it's a really quick way to be able to see what's happening with your patient's bite. As I play it forward, you're going to see I bit down a second time, which is very consistent information. And then I actually slid to the left. So you can see what happens as I move left. And are my back teeth disengaging? And you'll see that I have some contacts on number 15 and number 2 that hang in for a while before I actually get to my full disclusion on that side. So this is the same information that you can capture from T-Scan Novus and T-Scan Novus Core. There's just a little bit different functionality that exists in there with some analysis features. So let me go back into, and we'll review some cases. Let's stop sharing here. Let's stop my video so that you guys can see full screen. So now that you've just been able to see the T-Scan Novus Core in action, just want to spend some time, as I mentioned, going through some actual patient cases that are going to address some of the problems that we discussed and Alyssa talked about at the beginning of the webinar. And it seems like from the poll, at least, that you guys are experiencing these problems as well. So these cases will be very familiar to what you're used to. So let's look at a case that showcases how T-Scan Novus Core can be used effectively to help educate and communicate to your patients. We work with doctors across the world, and you notice signs of occlusal disease in their patients. The obvious next step for the dentist is to get some records and try to find out what that underlying issue is and come up with a treatment plan to help the patient. So often, patients don't notice the signs and they don't have symptoms yet. So you as a dentist can see the problem unfolding right in front of you. But in order to help your patients understand and own their occlusal problems, what many T-Scan dentists have done is, they started taking a quick T-Scan movie and they're using that to help communicate and educate their patients on the patient's bite. So this here is a perfect example of how a patient can quickly understand some of their bite problems that might be causing occlusal issues. It's very easy to capture with Novus Core and with Novus, and allows you then to take the next step with the patient and undergo any additional diagnostics that might need to happen. So let me play through this. So this is a patient scan, and you can see that similar to what you saw when I took a scan, the patient closes, and this is them just holding their teeth together. So one of the things you would point out to the patient is you would say, okay, Mrs. Smith, there's 47% of force on this number 2 tooth. There's your center of force trajectory should be more in the middle target zone here. You've got, almost 70% of pressure on your right. I think that's what's causing this, but I need to get additional records for that. So when you compare that to what a good scan looks like, and you show the patient, in an ideal scenario, this is what a good scan should look like, where we have even pressures amongst all the teeth. We've got no one pressure that's higher than anything else. Our center force trajectory is coming down the middle here, and we've got near 50-50 balance, 52.8 to 47.2. There's some T-Scan dentists out there that would say, no, you need to get that more balanced, but this is a very, very good end result for the patient. And so, when you can compare their scan to a good finished T-Scan, it's going to help them understand their occlusal issue. The second application we're going to discuss is using T-Scan Novus Core to help rule in or rule out occlusion on a common problem of patients coming in with a painful tooth. So in preparation for this webinar, Alyssa and I were talking, and she actually brought up that her sister recently went through this sort of problem where she had a restoration done and she had pain and sensitivity on that particular tooth and wound up going back in 4 or 5 times to her doctor's office until they could fix it. So that's just a common problem that we see. Patients calling into your practice for this, it can be disruptive to the day. It's frustrating for you. It's frustrating for them, especially when the problem is hard to identify. So what we can do is we can take what's called a clench and grind movie on T-Scan Novus Core, and it allows you to easily rule in or rule out it being an occlusal issue. Let me explain how that works. So you can instruct the patient to close down on the sensor and then slide right and left. Let me play this. So you can have the patient slide right and left on the sensor until they feel the pain that they are complaining about. So in this example, the patient had expressed pain on number 14 as they were sliding and grinding to the left. You can notice the high force contact that appears. I'll play it again. There's a high force contact that appears on number 14 during this movement. And even though there's other high forces in this patient's bite, the one that's causing the pain is the contact on number 14 that keeps coming in and out as the patient moves over it while they grind. So after one adjustment, now the patient can slide right and left. You can see they're going to start sliding right and left. and they're not feeling that pain anymore. And because the occlusion was ruled in as a problem, it was easy to try and fix and solve the patient's problems immediately. So the next case we want to review is using T-Scan Novus Core for finishing any of your cases, as Alyssa had discussed in the beginning. So whether you use T-Scan for a single crown, a bridge, a splint, a denture, an implant restoration, having the data to ensure balance is going to help improve the longevity of that restoration. It's going to reduce problems post-insertion and ensure patient comfort. So in the following case, you're going to see how a crown insertion can often cause some of the common problems that you might see interrupting your everyday practice. When you get it right the first time, you're going to see less of those patients coming back in to get readjusted. So this patient had new crowns on number 13 and 14. The patient has had different dentistry done over the years, very similar to what you see in your practice. After the crowns were inserted, the patient immediately felt pain on number 16. And the dentist, over the course of a few weeks, kept trying to adjust the new crowns to fit better and provide comfort. And eventually what happened is the patient wound up parting ways with the dentist and went to see someone else for help. So the patient wound up in an office with someone that has T-Scan Novus, and T-Scan Novus Core actually was done on this one, and an analysis was done to see what might be the problem. And so as the patient closes on the sensor, you can see as this comes in that number 16 has this high pressure contact on it with over 38% of all the force in the mouth on that one tooth. And actually it's at one point, I think it got to over 40% there. So right away, the doctor knows, okay, it's not 13 and 14, it's 16 is the issue here. The dentist did 2 corrections on number 16 to balance out the bite. So let me play this. And what we're looking at, even though you guys are not trained on T-Scan, some of you are, what you're looking for is that there's less pressure on that tooth. I think that's an obvious thing that we're looking for. And you're still relying on patient feedback as well. And then you're looking to see that the center of force trajectory, the little diamond kite, is moving more towards the middle zone, and we're starting to balance things out. So this is how the case ended up, and the patient was pleased with the result. And again, this wasn't, a full equilibration. This was identifying a problem that the patient had and going in and fixing the problem. Had the initial dentist, when they did the crowns, used a technology like T-Scan Novus Core, they could have prevented the patient from having this problem in the first place. So inevitably, as you're listening and watching the webinar, you may be wondering, is T-Scan a good fit for me? Is it good for my practice? Would my patients respond in this way to it? So when we began the webinar, we talked about 3 of the most common occlusal problems that you face as dentists. And we hope throughout this webinar, we've been able to show you how the use of T-Scan helps address those problems. So as a dentist, who doesn't want to obtain the best outcomes possible for their patients? Of course you do. We know that isn't even a question. Our hope is that you strongly consider how T-Scan can help provide you that best possible outcome. And in the process, it's going to make your practice more efficient and engage and educate your patients. When patients can clearly see what's going on in their mouth, it's going to naturally lead to higher case acceptance rates as well. So as you consider incorporating T-Scan into your practice, here's just a quick reminder of which one might suit you better. So Novus Core is for the single dentistry practice that treats common dental and occlusal issues. It's going to provide you still with valuable bite force and timing data, right? The core things that T-Scan provides us. Novus, it's going to provide you with additional analysis features for the practice that's treating patients with implants, comprehensive cosmetic dentistry, you're doing digital dentistry, or you might even be doing some TMD. So as you consider taking the next step to becoming a T-Scan dentist and making a decision as to which technologies to bring into your practice, it's important to understand the things that set T-Scan apart from other technologies that are on the market. First and foremost, T-Scan has been heavily researched over the years. It's something that we've focused heavily on as well. Our bibliography contains over hundreds of articles referencing T-Scan. There's 2 full research handbooks that exist that are solely focused on T-Scan and its many applications. Next, we have an extensive network of global key opinion leaders that are experts in their fields. They rely heavily on the data that the T-Scan provides them, and we are so incredibly thankful for our key opinion leaders that we work with. And lastly, we partnered with several prominent organizations over the years that are strong advocates for our technology and really in teaching occlusion as well. So we want to thank you for your time today. We're going to have a question and answer section as well. So before we jump into that, just want to share an exciting offer with you for those that are not currently using T-Scan in your practice. If you sign up for a one-on-one demonstration by Friday, March 19th, and you wind up purchasing the T-Scan, either T-Scan Novus Core or T-Scan Novus, we will provide you with a free box of small and large sensors, which is a few $100 savings there. So let me turn my video back on and Alyssa video on. Okay, great. So let's just take a look at a couple of the questions that we had there. Okay, so maybe the first one to talk about, Alyssa, is it's come up a couple times in the questions here. And we hear it often too, what is the learning curve of this type of technology? And maybe you want to address that one?
Sure. Like every new technology you're going to use, there is a learning curve associated with it. Our training is broken down into 2 components. The first is to make sure that you're collecting good data. And then the second is how to take that data and apply it to your patients and cases. The best thing to do is use it and not have it sit on your shelf. The more you use it, the more comfortable you'll get with it, the better you'll become with it. And we have a number of resources and outlets to help you along the way.
Okay, great. Of course, the question of price has come up in the questions. So since we have a global audience that's on here, we ask that you contact us directly or your distributors directly. That is the best way to get the most accurate pricing information for your specific region. Mm-hmm. The next one that kind of relates to that actually is, so I know we had mentioned this in the webinar, but the question came up around, if someone buys T-Scan Novus Core and they decide that they want T-Scan Novus, they want to upgrade. So can they upgrade? What does that look like? Do you want to approach that one?
Yeah. So as I discussed in the beginning, and then Jen was able to show you in the demonstration, both systems use the Novus handle and the Novus sensors and supports. And so when you buy Core, you're already equipped with the correct hardware and you're used to using and buying those sensors. And so it really is as seamless as a software upgrade. So if you decide to upgrade at any point, you would work with your account manager or your sales rep to do so, and it's a software upgrade and you would be upgraded to the full Novus. If you decide within the first 6 months of purchasing Core that you get it, you start using it, you're comfortable with it, and you decide really Novus is the product for me, I want to go to the full-blown system. If you do that within 6 months, there is a discount applied to the upgrade so that you can get off and running.
Absolutely. All right, great. Another question that often comes up is the question around intraoral scanners. And the question is essentially, my intraoral scanner gives me occlusion data. How does that different from this T-Scan digital occlusion data? And so I'll address that. We actually do have a slide that kind of goes through that process. But it is a common question that comes up, and there is some market confusion as to how those 2 technologies work. So T-Scan and intraoral scanners and their occlusion data. So let me just move to the slide just to help here. Okay, so this will maybe help explain the differences here, but essentially, intraoral scanners, they're ideal for visualizing the occlusal clearance when designing your restorations. And so some of them have virtual articulation. And what it does is it calculates the dimensions of the interocclusal contacts. And that's extremely helpful in the restorative design process. But what it doesn't give you is the actual occlusal force information or that patient's functional data as the patient closes and slides right and left, what's happening with the forces on the teeth during that time. And so that's where those two things different. They're actually used very closely together, right? If you think about using your intraoral scanner to get the data you need to design the best restoration, when you're delivering that restoration and you go into the patient's mouth, that's when you're going to use T-Scan to make sure that there's not high forces on that tooth, there's not an imbalance that exists. And I think that's, there is some confusion out there, but they're two different technologies. They work very well together, actually, but provide different information.
Absolutely.
So let's just see if we have any other questions here. Someone had asked about obtaining the goal scan for patient education. So absolutely, we will make sure that we get that set to you. If we have let me just read this for a second. So the question is, if this is a good one, this is a good clinical question that I'll try to answer as much as I can. And then if we need to have a clinician step in, we can too. So it says, if we have a patient with a complete set of post teeth on one side and only up on the premolars on the other side, do we still work to get balance on bite force on both sides? Or is it okay to have more percentage of forces on the side complete set of post teeth? So yes. So depending on, even if you take a scenario, if you had implants on one side and natural teeth on another side, you'd want less force on the natural teeth. And so your balance is you're not gonna want necessarily 50-50. So if you've got missing teeth or anything, you're gonna want the balance to be maybe a little bit off of that towards the other, towards where the natural teeth are, so that you're not overloading a particular side. So yes, your goal is not always to get the center of force trajectory smack dab in the middle. It really depends on the patient's dentition and what your goal is there. So question came up around DSD integration. So we do have, the Novus product has an integration with DSD. So if you're a digital smile design dentist and you're using the DSD app, you can easily send your scan from the Novus product to your DSD app for patient analysis, and there's a number of features. So we'll actually send you a link to that video, or you can go on our website to our partner page to see a link there. I think that's probably all we have time for right now. It looks like we were able to answer most questions that are in here. If we didn't, we will go through from the ones I can see. I hope we did, but if we didn't, we will respond to each of you directly offline. If you wish to reach out to us separately, please send an email to info@techscan.com, or you can call us at the number on the screen, which is 617-464-4500. In addition, we'll be sharing the recording of this session as well, so you can either watch it again or share with your team as well, which is a great, I think, a great way to help give them an introduction to T-Scan. And we just want to thank you again for your time today, and we hope to hear from you all that are on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, everyone.